I worked at a popular gas station in a small town in Idaho. I went to the university that's sort of nearby. It was only a half hour away. There's a lot of competition for jobs near the university, so this was the only one I could find that paid a decent rate and worked with my school schedule. I had a modified swing shift. I usually got to work at around 6 p.m., which meant I didn't get off until 2 a.m. I actually liked this schedule because at the start of my shift I worked with my friend, and the people in town were just getting off work, so the first few hours went by pretty fast. After midnight, I would be on my own and could get some studying done. I had a few things I was required to do each night before I left, but it would only take me like a few minutes. It had been a busy night and didn't die down until close to 11 p.m. Almost everybody knew who I was at this point, and I felt comfortable enough to strike up conversation with whoever was in the store. There were usually too many people coming in and out to keep track of, but until 10 p.m., we had 2 registers open, so there was never a long line. My friend finished his tasks before the end of his shift. He clocked out and stuck around to talk with me. I had to make sure the drinks were stocked well enough because I wasn't supposed to go back while I was alone in the store. I usually saved that job for the last hour of my shift, when the graveyard workers showed up. I checked the drinks from the outside, determined that I had enough, and just kept talking to my friend. Eventually he had to leave, and I went to study by the cash register. It was the perfect spot, because I could see out the front door and would know if anyone was coming. This allowed me to stop studying and look busy. The only downside was that I couldn't see the whole store without turning my body. If there was only one person in the store, I'd pretend to be doing something, or I would straighten up the counter. I didn't want to awkwardly stare at them the whole time they were in there, and because of how I was standing, it would make it pretty obvious if I did. It was close to midnight when someone finally drifted into the store. I talked with him a little, but he seemed to be in a rush. He grabbed some beer, had me get him some chewing tobacco and a few scratch cards, and then left. I wasn't really able to focus on studying that night, so I just went around the store restocking anything that seemed to be low. I kept hearing a weird noise coming from the back of the store, but just figured it was normal. It was an old store, and the back wasn't maintained very well. After a while, I realized it sounded like boxes were moving from behind the drinks. I decided I could check it out by opening the doors from the outside and peered in over the soda. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, and there weren't any strange noises coming from the back at this point. I just continued stalking, but kept thinking about the noises that I had heard. Finally, the graveyard shift worker showed up, and I was able to start stocking the fridge. I walked into the back and saw that someone had rearranged the boxes of milk in the back corner. I didn't think much of it and started stocking the soda and energy drinks. I felt a little uneasy and kept looking over towards the milk. I would talk off and on with my coworker, but he usually had his own things he needed to do before I left. Then I heard it again. There was a shuffling coming from the corner where the milk was stacked. I thought maybe we had a rodent back there, or that the boxes were stacked incorrectly and that they were wobbling. I made my way over to that side. When I got to the corner, a man jumped out and tackled me. I let out a loud scream, but his dirty hand quickly muffled my cry. He had one hand over my mouth, and the other moved up to his lips to tell me to be quiet. He was a younger man, but a lot bigger than I was. I tried to pull his hand from off my mouth, but he was way too strong. I tried to move, but he was pinning me to the ground with his body. I started to cry, trying to bite him, kick him, or hit him. Nothing was working. This all happened in the amount of time it took my coworker to run to the back, see what was going on, and dart towards the front desk. I could hear him calling the cops. The intruder pulled his hands away from my mouth, punched me in the stomach with so much force it knocked the air out of me, and ran after my coworker. I laid there on the ground, crying to myself until I heard my coworker start screaming. I pulled myself up and stumbled to the front. The guy was standing behind the counter, holding a knife and threatening to kill my coworker if he didn't open the safe. The problem was that we didn't have a key to the safe for that very reason. Only the managers had the key, and we would deposit money slips in there if our till got too high. My coworker emptied both registers, but it was only a small amount, and the guy kept screaming at him to open the safe. In a moment of stupidity, my coworker tried to act brave and shoved the guy. It backfired, and he stabbed my coworker right in the stomach. He must have seen me coming because he turned and started yelling that if I didn't open the safe that he would kill my coworker and then kill me too. I was crying, begging the guy to stop, explaining that we couldn't open the safe. He just stood there, waving his knife around and yelling at me. At this point, my coworker was on the ground behind the counter and I couldn't see him. The guy started coming towards me, but I ran out the front door. The doors opened outwards, so I put my foot up against the middle part and pushed all my weight into it. The guy began shoving himself at the door, and I didn't think I would be able to hold it much longer. I didn't even hear the sirens or see the cops coming when I felt people pull me away from the door. Even after I'd saw it was the police, I couldn't stop myself from screaming and crying. The guy had darted to the back of the store, but the only exit was out front. When the police caught up with him, he charged them with a knife. They shot him 3 times, and he died in the back of the store. All that for less than $400 in our registers. Even our safe would have had less than a few thousand. I later found out that the robber had entered the store at around 10 p.m. when it had been most busy and hidden our fridge for hours. The scariest part is that you could see the front counter from where he was hiding, but I was pointed in a completely different direction. That meant he would have sat there watching me for hours as I worked. I always wonder what would have happened if I had gone back there when no one else was working, or if he had come out of the fridge when the store was empty and I was all alone. I was lucky to have my coworker there, who was smart enough to call the cops. He was in the hospital for a while, but recovered quickly. I still keep in contact with him. I worked that shift for another few days before I quit. It wasn't worth risking something like that ever happening again. A few friends and I go on an annual camping trip. This year, we left later in the summer, near the end of July, and found a place near the river to set up camp. It was ridiculously hot, so we spent the rest of the afternoon in the water. When it started to get dark, we headed back to camp. We got a large fire going and cooked up some food. It was a good night, and we had the whole place to ourselves. Usually when we came out earlier in the summer, there would be tons of people camping along the river. We stayed up late talking, but eventually put out the fire and decided we were exhausted enough to go to sleep. Even this late, it was still hot enough to be uncomfortable, so I laid on top of my sleeping bag, still in my swimsuit. I closed my eyes and tried to get some rest. I must have been going in and out of sleep, because I was awoken by one of my friends grabbing my arm and telling me that there was someone moving around outside. All of us were awake and huddled in the middle of the tent, watching the shadows move around us. I could hear it. There was someone out there walking around. They slowly got closer, and we could see them standing so close to the side of our tent that we could hear him breathing. I checked to make sure that we were all here and that it wasn't one of my friends trying to scare us. No one was missing. This was really happening. We all just sat there, dead silent, listening to this guy breathing. He started mumbling to himself and walked away. We could hear him throwing things around our campsite. One of my friends slowly unzipped a side flap and we watched this guy going through our stuff. It was too dark and we weren't able to see more than just his outline. I grabbed the keys to our truck and told my friends that we needed to leave. We had no idea why this guy was here or what he wanted. He was still on the other side of camp. We unzipped the door to the tent and took off at a full sprint. My truck was between us and the stranger. The lights flashed when I pressed the button to unlock it, and I could see the guy standing there and watching us. We jumped into my truck, locked the doors, and sped off. He never even moved. He just sat there, watching us go until I couldn't see him anymore. I'm not sure what this guy wanted, and I'm not sure what he would have done if we stayed in our tent the rest of the night. I'm glad we left, and needless to say, we don't camp there that late in the summer anymore.